Tonight on Currents News, the coronavirus crisis is ripping through Queens, taking a heavy toll on the body and the mind. Suicides are rising at an alarming rate, but there is help.
People care and that there is help available, and that taking your own life should never be an option.
And job losses are to blame for much of the worry. They're up again by millions. One of the president's elite Navy aides is testing positive for the virus. Is the commander-in-chief at risk? Getting a vaccine to stop the outbreak could force Catholics to confront a big moral issue.
We can develop these vaccines without using these cell lines from aborted babies.
Plus, she's confronting COVID-19 head-on, and nurse Colleen Donovan is counting on God in the fight. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Concerns about mental health are growing in Queens, the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. Suicides are increasing a lot. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story on what people can do to stay mentally well.
New York City has suffered a tremendous loss as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, but not all have fallen victim to the virus.
People who have lost their jobs, who have lost loved ones, they feel a profound sense of hopelessness.
Queens City Councilman Eric Ulrich says the number of suicides in his borough since mid-March is shocking.
I don't think people have paid enough attention to the mental health impacts that the COVID crisis has had.
In 2019, from January 1st until April 29th, Queens saw 17 suicides. There have been 16 in the last 6 weeks since schools closed and people have been forced to stay home. Councilman Ulrich says he thinks that number could be even higher because so many suicides go unreported. This in a borough that's been hit especially hard by the virus. Queens now has more than 48,000 confirmed cases, and nearly 3,600 Queens residents have died from COVID-19. Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens Director of Field Operations Holly Jaskowitz-Schatz says the trauma of a global health crisis combined with a spike in unemployment and the loneliness of social isolation can be dangerous.
With this, we don't really have an end in sight. So then it makes the mind, wonder, what if, what's going to go on? And, that can just spiral out of control.
Catholic Charities is urging people to reach out for help. It has 5 outpatient clinics all around Brooklyn and Queens. It also has a call center open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. 5 days a week. The number is 718-722-6001. Counselors are also giving tips on how to stay mentally well from home during social distancing.
It's very easy when you're just home, not doing anything, not working, to not shower, not get dressed, maybe not eat healthily, so it's important to continue to have structure for your day.
Experts say a great way to do your part to combat the mental health aspect of the COVID crisis is to call your friends and family and leave notes for neighbors, because making that human connection might save a life. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
And for those of you who missed it, go to ccbq.org for information from Catholic Charities Brooklyn, Queens about making mental wellness appointments through telehealth. That's at ccbq.org, or you can call 718-722-6001. The latest evidence of the economic devastation and stress from the pandemic is found in the soaring new numbers of Americans out of work. More than 3 million filed new unemployment claims in the last week. In less than 2 months, over 33 million people have lost their jobs. Tomorrow's monthly report is expected to hit an unemployment rate not seen since the Great Depression. President Trump is playing hardball with the CDC. He's telling them to rewrite guidelines for getting the country back to business. The health experts prepared recommendations to help churches, schools, restaurants, and other places reopen safely. The administration rejected them as too restrictive. President Trump is driving hard to reopen the U.S. amid one of the worst economic meltdowns in history. Several states have already started opening up. More will do so tomorrow. Here in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo says while we've turned a corner, it's not enough to begin relaxing restrictions, even with overall declining rates of deaths, hospitalizations, and infections.
What we're doing here shows results. You have states that are opening where you still are in the incline. I think that's a mistake.
But the risk of reopening is one that some business owners are willing to take.
My place is ready, everything is ready, and my clients are more than ready.
A number of hair salons and barber shops are preparing to be back in business again in Texas starting tomorrow. And service may look a little different. The governor is encouraging but not requiring customers and stylists to wear masks. Texas, the second most populated state in the country, is experiencing an uptick in coronavirus cases, and some local leaders fear it could get worse.
I just think for me, we're going a bit too fast. You don't want to go through this again.
19 states are seeing an upward trend in new cases over the last 14 days, according to Johns Hopkins University data. And they'll all be reopened in some capacity by this weekend.
So if, as we reopen, there's a lot of spread, it will take weeks before we actually see it.
The former CDC director is warning Congress the nation should brace for the coronavirus being here for the long haul.
There will be, tragically, at least 100,000 deaths from COVID by the end of this month. As bad as this has been, it's just the beginning.
There's been pressure for some states to open more quickly. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says he won't give in to it. But California Governor Gavin Newsom will allow some businesses to resume on Friday. In Washington state, stay-at-home orders are extended until the end of the month.
If we abandon our efforts that have been significantly successful to date, that curve is going to go shooting right back up. This beast is going to get off the floor and bite us back. And this is just a biological certainty.
In California, while some businesses will reopen, office buildings, malls, and dine-in restaurants will remain closed for the time being. New research is showing that New York City's coronavirus outbreak was so large it fueled a wave of infections across the country. The experts are saying it happened before social distancing limits were set to stop the growth. Travel out of town by thousands spread the disease to Louisiana, Texas, the West Coast, even Alaska. The researchers are concluding that the city was, quote, the primary gateway for the rest of the U.S. Overseas, one of the hardest hit countries, Italy, is lifting its rigid lockdown that lasted for months. But a big clash erupted over resuming public masses. Now there's a new deal between the church and state. Melissa Butts has the story from Rome.
Masses have been suspended in Italy since March 8th, with many bishops protesting they didn't re-begin with phase 2 on May 4th. However, a compromise has been found, and the first Mass will be celebrated Monday, May 18th. After a tug of war between the church and state, Italian bishops signed an agreement with their government to specify how to safely celebrate Mass again. The defined protocol lays out some sanitary measures so we can return to celebrate while respecting everyone's health. They refer to the parish, the priest, and the faithful. Churches must limit the number of participants to ensure a distance of 3 feet at all times. Parishes that can should have designated entrances and exits. Hand sanitizer must be available at the door. There is to be no holy water, and liturgical items and the microphone should be cleaned after each ceremony. The priest can celebrate baptisms, weddings, and funerals, but not confirmation. He must give communion with a mask and gloves. There won't be a collection, but donations can be placed in baskets positioned around the church. Those with fever, coronavirus, or in contact with an infected person cannot attend Mass. All must wear masks regardless. There will be no sign of peace and no choir, but an organist is allowed. Like the rest of the measures, if the number of infected people increases, religious ceremonies will be suspended again to stop the spread. The Vatican has not announced when they will re-begin their public masses, but they will likely follow in Italy's footsteps and re-begin in the month of May. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
Good news tonight from on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt, hit hard by the COVID crisis. Diocese of Brooklyn priest Father Mark Bristol, the ship's Catholic chaplain, is getting ready for the crew to worship again. More than 1,100 sailors on the aircraft carrier tested positive for coronavirus and one died. After evacuation and isolation, the crew is now back on board and Father Bristol is there to minister to them. In a new message from the ship, he's saying, "I am in good health and have tested negative for the virus. My fellow chaplains and I are currently working with the commanding officer to develop guidelines and procedures to conduct religious services safely, minimizing the potential spread of the virus." The Pentagon is considering banning any people who've been hospitalized with COVID-19 from joining the military. An official is saying what happened on the Theodore Roosevelt is raising concerns about the readiness of the armed forces. The Pentagon is also being cautious because the long-term effects of the infection are not yet understood. Here are some more headlines. A White House military aide has tested positive for COVID-19. The president and vice president have since tested negative, and the White House says they're in good health. Meat prices are soaring in grocery stores and could go up as much as 20% in coming weeks. Neiman Marcus today became the first major retailer to file for bankruptcy. There are no charges filed yet, but cops in Georgia are investigating the killing of an unarmed jogger. The deadly shooting happened 2 months ago. An online video purportedly shows the deadly confrontation. According to police reports, a retired cop and his son chased down 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery as he was running along a road. The shooting came amid claims of a rash of neighborhood break-ins, and the ex-cop allegedly thought Arbery resembled the suspect. The jogger's family is demanding justice.
There is no place on earth, really, where what happened to Ahmaud wasn't criminal. But apparently in Brunswick, the men can get away with it for months at a time.
The state's district attorney says this case will be going to a Georgia grand jury. The Supreme Court is throwing out the convictions in the Bridgegate scandal. 2 associates of former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie were found guilty of disrupting traffic at the George Washington Bridge as political payback. A local mayor didn't support Christie's campaign for re-election. The unanimous court said the case was not a federal crime. And the criminal case against Michael Flynn is being dropped by the Justice Department. The former Trump national security advisor had previously pleaded guilty to lying about conversations with a Russian diplomat. Recently released documents raised questions about how the case was prosecuted. There's a lot more news headed your way. A coronavirus vaccine could offer a moral dilemma for Catholics. Archbishop Joseph Naumann is here to tell us about it. Plus, God is next to her on the front lines of the virus crisis, how this nurse gets through the day. And a day offering comfort to people across the country who are doing something Catholics do on a daily basis. We'll show you.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
As researchers try to find a COVID-19 vaccine, an ethical issue for Catholics has surfaced. Some research involves the use of cell lines from aborted fetuses. Joining us now to discuss this issue is Kansas City Archbishop Joseph Naumann, chair of the Committee on Pro-Life Activities for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And Archbishop, scientists are right now conducting human trials on vaccines using cell lines from aborted fetuses. Why is this an ethical problem for Catholics?
Well, obviously, all of us want a vaccine, and we want one as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. But we also want a vaccine that's developed ethically. And unfortunately, there are some cell lines that are being used in some of the vaccines that are being developed that were recovered from aborted fetuses. Now, there are other cell lines that can be used. It's not necessary for the pharmaceutical companies to use the cell lines from aborted fetuses. So our appeal to the FDA is to, yes, get us a vaccine as quickly as possible, but also get us one that is not ethically compromised.
All right, well, everyone, as you said, wants to protect themselves from this virus and wants a vaccine. Well, what if a vaccine is discovered using this method? What advice would you give to Catholics?
Well, again, I think now's the moment while it's being developed that we should be advocating and for an ethically developed one. If, we receive a vaccine, if the vaccine is developed and it does use an aborted fetus cell line, where there is precedent where if there aren't other vaccines available and it is a threat to public health, where Catholics could use this, but as they use it, they must register a protest and again insist that an ethically developed vaccine. I think the problem is that this is used by some who promote abortion to say, well, look, we need abortion so that we can have these vaccines, and it's not true.
Right.
We can develop these vaccines without using these cell lines from aborted babies.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, abortion centers remain open for business during the crisis while other medical procedures are being postponed. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's very ironic, and it's not just that they're remaining open, but they're really exploiting the fears, both the health fears, but also the economic fears that some women are under a great amount of pressure at this time. So I'm grateful that our crisis pregnancy centers continue to serve at this time, and we encourage anyone who's pregnant and experiencing difficulties and anxieties to reach out to one of our crisis pregnancy centers. There's a whole community that's ready to help you and to stand by you with whatever problems or challenges you face.
Sure. And the head of Planned Parenthood says this pandemic may have what she's calling a silver lining, increased access to chemical abortions provided through prescriptions. What do you think of that?
Well, if you saw the movie Unplanned, I thought one of the most difficult scenes in that movie was when Abby Johnson had a chemically induced abortion. And it showed that this is not an uncomplicated and simple event in a woman's life. In fact, it's more traumatic that they're in isolation. They don't know if they're going to survive it. And it's not a solution. It's still killing the child, and it's not safe for women either.
All right, Kansas City Archbishop Joseph Naumann, chair of the Committee on Pro-Life Activities for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. God bless.
Tonight, we continue to honor the healthcare heroes on the front lines of this crisis during National Nurses Week. Our Emily Druby introduces us to a nurse who says her Catholic faith is what's getting her through this pandemic.
Nurses, they've been called to the front lines. Heroes risking it all to help strangers. But who is helping them? Well, for Colleen Donovan, that's God.
I think my faith has gotten me through a lot of things in my life.
Colleen is normally an OR nurse at NYU Winthrop Hospital in Long Island. But like so many of her fellow nurses across the country, her job changed with the pandemic. She moved from the operating room to the intensive care units, taking care of COVID-19 patients.
It was totally different. Totally different. I was very scared.
A natural feeling when on the front lines of a war. Colleen, who's been a nurse for over 30 years, tells us her coworkers and her strong Catholic faith have helped her through this.
I find great strength in prayer. I pray a lot. I don't step out of bed in the morning without saying my prayers and thanking God for giving me another day.
And she's not alone. Catholics across the country are leaning on their faith for strength during the outbreak. 27% say their faith has grown stronger during this time, while 68% say their faith has helped them a lot to get through this crisis. Colleen, a lifelong Catholic, says she's seen people's faith grow firsthand. She sent us this photo of a daily prayer group in a COVID-19 unit. It has given her strength.
A lot of people are praying, and a lot of people have come back to their faith, and they're drawn to prayer and finding great comfort in it. After report, we would all gather in the middle of the room, and people would hold hands and we'd pray, and it just kind of calmed you. Just really gave you a good sense of calm, and that we could do this. We could take care of it.
They can take care of it, and they always will. Emily Druby, Currents News.
Blood thinners seem to be helping COVID-19 patients. Doctors at Mount Sinai Hospital looked at 2,700 patients and found more of those who were not given these drugs died compared to those who received the blood thinners. That's likely because coronavirus seems to cause blood clots that can impact the lungs, kidney, and brain. And a quick reminder, Dr. Bob Tabali is here tomorrow. He'll tackle the latest developments about the pandemic and answer your questions regarding the coronavirus. Send them to askthedoctor@desalesmedia.org. Again, the email is askthedoctor@desalesmedia.org. This is America's Day of National Prayer, the kind of comfort so many need right now. Certainly things will look different this year because of the pandemic, but the intention is the same. A day for people of all faiths to pray and meditate. The idea originated with the Continental Congress in 1775. Today, First Lady Melania Trump tweeted a message.
Americans have unified in challenging moments and during our greatest times of need. We always turn to prayer.
The First Lady said the nation must always keep its faith in God and pray for the courage and knowledge that better days are ahead. Hundreds of Floridians are out of their homes tonight as wildfires rage across the Panhandle. Firefighters are battling the flames that forced some 1,600 people to evacuate. Interstate 10 is closed in both directions due to smoke. A top state official is saying tonight the threat is far from over. And still to come on Currents News, flying the friendly skies these days is more like flying the empty skies, how airlines are trying to get customers back. Also ahead, this flag may not be flying, but it is drawing a lot of attention. The story behind it when we come back. Air travel across this country and overseas is crippled tonight as the pandemic is keeping most Americans grounded. Leading U.S. airlines are taking steps to get passengers back into the near-empty skies. Mandy Gaither has the story.
When it comes to traveling during this pandemic, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention still recommends you stay home. And numbers from the Airlines for America organization show people are heeding that warning. After seeing a 2% increase in passenger volume in late February, air travel has fallen 96% from those highs. Domestic U.S. flights are carrying about 15 to 20 passengers on average, compared to 85 to 100 passengers in the first 2 months of 2020. U.S. passenger airlines have idled over 3,000 aircraft, constituting nearly 50% of carriers' active fleet. In an effort to get consumers back, leading U.S. airlines will be requiring face coverings for customer-facing employees and passengers during check-in, boarding, in-flight, and deplaning. Airlines for America says carriers are also working to sanitize cockpits and high-touch areas like seatbelts and armrests, and have implemented a range of policies such as back-to-front boarding and adjusting food and beverage services. I'm Mandy Gaither.
And finally tonight, flights over Indiana will see a special view as they pass by. A 10,000 square foot version of Old Glory painted on a field that Justin Riggins owns. He recruited family and friends for the project and got it done in about 2 hours. Riggins said he wanted to create something people could see from the air to remember there are heroes on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time. Good night.